You know the episode is going to be good when it opens with no dialogue and only Ramin Djawadi's score, kind of harkening back to the Trial of the Seven. It really submerges you into the tense atmosphere that we left off on, and even the cinematography aids this oncoming doom feeling. The camera slowly creeping through this nighttime version of the Red Keep makes the tone feel so eerie. I also love the fact that they don't show Viserys' body and play up the suspense as to what is going down. Most people should be able to put together what's happening, but I like how we have to infer what is going on instead of being told that. The good old show don't tell. And they did a great job of that by focusing on Alicent and Otto's initial reaction to Viserys' death. Surprisingly, I thought Alicent would be much colder towards Viserys, and she ended up being very compassionate, essentially setting up the conflict of the episode since her reaction to Viserys' death is harshly contrasted by Otto's. This leads into the small council meeting, which ended up being my favorite scene of the episode. The ending was pretty crazy with Rhaenys, but this scene was insanely riveting, and I was glued to the screen to see how each character would react to the hostile takeover. The fact that Otto has been planning for this event is so satisfying because the man finally gets to flourish his ill intent. I've been craving for this man to finally unleash his true power, and he is really turning into Tywin Lannister here. Also, I like the turn that Alicent immediately nopes out of being on Otto's side, and instead wants to handle things in her own way. I thought they would both work together here, but their opposition made for a surprising turn in the plot. So even though Team Black doesn't show up here, there is still some heavy conflict, because the ramifications as to who gets Aegon first are catastrophic. But going back to the small council meeting, the death of Lord Beesbury, despite him not being a prevalent character, was very striking, because everyone in the audience will sympathize with this man and his outrage in this apparent takeover attempt. But when Sir Criston Cole enters the background of the frame, you know shit is about to go down. His death essentially sets the bar in that Otto is not messing around and intends on getting his hands dirty. Like, the man didn't even care about removing the body from the room and wanted to finish the meeting first. What a mad lad. Then Harold Westerling finally opposes Criston Cole, and that little showdown is what I've been longing for. I also love the amount of shots that featured Harold Westerling here because his reactions to what everyone is saying were so visually expressive. Because we know that he was pretty loyal to the Targaryens, and what he is witnessing is making him sick. A man driven by honor and doing the right thing is just absolutely appalled to what is transpiring. So for the editors to keep cutting back to his reactions was very cathartic to me. I hope he has more of a role later on in the story because I'd love to see this man wreck Criston Cole in the future. Because in this season, he hasn't had much to do besides just standing in the background. That's why I got very excited when he confronted Criston, on top of the man needing some punishment. Then the episode shifts toward the race between Alicent and Otto in finding Aegon. To me, this is where the episode lost its hot streak of me being on the edge of my seat because the episode slows down a lot as we go through King's Landing in this search. In terms of a writing perspective, nothing is wrong with this, and it's a great form of conflict to have between Alicent and Otto. But as a byproduct of this long hunt, it made the episode a lot slower. Lost was that feeling of a hot blitz as everyone was trying to keep everything under wraps and control what was happening. It was nice to flesh out some of the shady things that happen in King's Landing, but when this is the penultimate episode of the season, you expect a little bit more productivity in the narrative. But was it bad? Not really. I just feel like it would have made things way more interesting if Rhaenyra and her family were there when Viserys died. Because I thought that was the notion since Rhaenys was still in King's Landing, but I guess she stayed there for whatever reason? They made it come across that this was the day after the last episode, because I assume the final scene in episode 8 took place right after the Last Supper. So I was definitely confused throughout the episode and thought the creators were intentionally holding off and showing Rhaenyra's perspective. If Team Black was there, that could also bring up the fact that Otto would try to kill them instantly. That would definitely raise the stakes a lot and would keep the tension really high throughout the episode, instead of it dissipating as everyone searches for Aegon for like 30 minutes. It would definitely be questionable if Rhaenyra's family would be able to survive Otto's wrath, since he could probably kill them in their sleep, but you never know, maybe Daemon has his suspicions and has precautions in place for that event. Along with the fact that Alicent would immediately try to protect them, given that she was also one of the first people to hear about Viserys' death. But I assume there's already a path in place for Rhaenyra's story, so I can't make a judgment as to if they should have been in King's Landing. Not to mention that originally in the books, Rhaenys and Rhaenyra's crew weren't in King's Landing during this whole event. Then we have the most shocking scene in the episode that isn't Rhaenys busting through the floor, but instead, Lair Strong busting all over Alicent's feet. This was definitely something I didn't see coming, and I was starting to get uncomfortable when Alicent was slowly taking off her shoes. But hey, I guess she has to pay back this man somehow, given that she's practically in debt to him. I'm kind of sad though that there won't be a lot of conflict for her to pay him back in larger ways, and the man just wants some footsie time, unless if he'll want both in the future. To me, it feels like kind of a cop-out in that regard, but it seems like Larys may be going after Otto's feet next. This man's goals are far greater than our understanding. It's going to be like Robert Baratheon, where instead of making the 8, he wants to cream on all the most powerful feet in the realm. Before going into the ending of the episode, I want to touch on a few notable scenes. Otto Hightower instilling fear amongst the lords was very unsettling, and seeing the reactions of different lords and their ideals was great. I wish we spent more time here and even the writers showing us their executions to further emphasize how scary Otto is here, because I'd rather we see that instead of watching the Kingsguard wander around the streets for a long duration. Which, Eric and them also being twins, was such a confusing duo of characters to follow in this episode, especially since the writers were trying to portray development through them and their changing motivations. I still have no idea who was who, and I wish they didn't make them twins, because for new characters who had a brief amount of time, who looked the same, and basically had the same name, was really hard to follow. It just feels like the writers are trolling us in that regard. Helena being an oracle and randomly spouting out hints of the future will definitely keep me paying attention to her. She's such a precious little creature. And then the last thing before moving on to the ending, the confrontation between Otto and Alicent was great because Alicent has finally seen Otto for who he truly is. It kind of helps that Rhaenys helped Alicent see her metaphorical imprisonment, so her taking control and besting Otto was a good turn. That and Otto was kind of proud of Alicent for winning, and that was really cute of him. Then their debate about whether it's better to kill a few people to spare the realm for an oncoming war was really good. Very much like Tywin in regards to the Red Wedding and his debate with Tyrion. Any scene with Otto and Alicent is basically perfect in my eyes, and they are both very rich characters. Then finally we have the coronation of Aegon. I love how the writers were able to quickly sell Aegon's arc, primarily through acting and a tiny bit of dialogue. A character going from being rejected all his life and being entrenched in the scum of humanity, to getting loved, worshipped, and accepted was really sweet and made me care a lot for Aegon. With just a couple of scenes, Aegon goes from a lost cause to someone that is really relatable and likable. So that's pretty impressive from a writing standpoint, and I'll be very interested to see Aegon's change of heart and being king in the future episodes. Then the controversial twist happens where Rhaenys busts through the floor of the dragon pit. From what I've seen, this is a major change from the books. So some people are upset by this moment and say it's for the sake of shock value and is dumb, given that Rhaenys spares everyone. Now, the writing here isn't perfect, and there are some minor plot holes, but I think the scene would be much better if there was a threat pushing Rhaenys out of the building, instead of her leaving on her own accord. I feel like the most natural thing would be to have some archers posted on the upper decks, as a normal defensive measure, to pressure Rhaenys, and that is the reason she needs to get out. You can still have the moment where she approaches the Greens, but instead of making a decision as to if she roasts them alive or not, make it ambiguous, since she'll need to flee before we find out if she'll kill her own family. So if that's the case, we now don't have a reason to get upset about this plot point. And I've also seen people say to have another dragon come out of the pit, which could also work, but that would kind of confuse me because I'd assume each dragon would have their own designated areas and aren't freely roaming around everywhere in the pit. In terms of a character perspective and Rhaenys not killing the Greens, I can kind of understand that decision. Primarily her not wanting to be responsible for incinerating like half of her family. Also, I can see her sparing mercy on them since Alicent essentially did the same to Rhaenys earlier in the episode, and didn't just flat out kill her during the coup. That, and since she's witnessing the entire population of King's Landing support this new male ruler, she's probably thinking back to when she lost the throne and thinks people won't accept Rhaenyra because of tradition now. But yeah, it's definitely flawed, and even if the writers are saying that people are going to have issues with it, then you know they screwed up.
It's a complex choice, and one that people might dispute or have a problem with, but that's the choice Rhaenys makes in that moment. You know, great heroic moment for her character.
It comes across as the writers wanting to give Rhaenys a bigger moment since I guess she doesn't have one in the source material, so that she can have a larger impact. Which is nice, but I wish they took the time to rewrite the scene so it makes more sense. They could have easily established an external force to deter Rhaenys from having to make this pivotal decision that people will get mad over. Besides this, the episode was still pretty good, but I think there's a few flaws that drag it down a bit to not classify it as being one of the best episodes in the season. Thank you for watching, and let me know what you thought about this episode of House of the Dragon in the comments.